are listening to the Hong Kong Trail Rockers podcast. You will learn from experienced trail runners about their humble beginnings. You will learn from ultra-marathon runners about their training and nutrition techniques. You will get life advice from accomplished individuals. And you will learn about all the beautiful trails we have here in Hong Kong. Without further ado, here's your host, Vince Nateri, with this week's episode of the Hong Kong Trail Rockers podcast.
Welcome to the Hong Kong Trail Rockers podcast. Today I have with me one of the fastest runners in Hong Kong, the Mr. Jeremy Ritcey. So he's how do I introduce him? So he's everyone who has done some sort of running in Hong Kong probably knows him. He has won so many races. The list runs huge. And today I'm hoping to talk to him about how he got into running, what drives him, what his techniques are, and what we can learn from one of the top runners in Hong Kong. So welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Thank you very much. That was a little bit over the top, I think, for an introduction, but I'll take it.
And he's also very humble, as you can see. All right, so to tell our listeners, right? How would you introduce yourself? Who is Jeremy Ritcey?
Well, I'm a runner, definitely. I'm someone who just likes to be in the mountains. I have multiple lives. I'm a teacher. I'm a father. I'm a husband. So, running for me is a side outlet. It is a big part of my life, definitely. But yeah, I'm just someone who likes being outside more than anything.
All right, so what's your favorite trail in Hong Kong?
Definitely the Lantau Trail. Specifically the peaks on Lantau. Love them.
Why is that?
I think it's because it's one of the places where I spent a lot of time when I was really getting into ultras, and I got to know those mountains really well, and they just hold a lot of value for me.
You've obviously accomplished many things in your running career, right? What is the one thing that stands out for you?
Well, yeah, I've been doing it a long time. So, well, in terms of Hong Kong and people I meet, I've been doing it a long time. I know people who've been doing it a lot longer than me. Accomplishments, though, I really think my fastest Hong Kong 100 is one of my favorite accomplishments.
The one in 2012?
Yeah, that one.
And why is that your favorite accomplishment?
It was the first time that I was really... it's the first time that there was some growth in Hong Kong for trail running. Like Ryan Sands was there, and that was a huge deal. And that was the first time that happened. And I remember, standing at the starting line, and Ryan Sands is standing beside me. It was just epic at the time. I mean, now these days, yeah. I mean, look at the lineup for the Hong Kong 100 in 2 weeks from now, and there's like the who's who of ultra running. But back then, 4 years ago, just 4 years ago, people didn't come to Hong Kong to race.
That's right. I remember Janet and Steve handed out the flyers outside one of the races. I think it was outside Moontracker or something on the way at the ferry pier. They were handing out flyers just to get anyone into that race.
I remember that. That's amazing. Wow, it's come a long way.
Do you have any mentors? Who has had the most influence on you?
I've had a few, I think, more training partners that have had influence on me than anything else. And yeah, they've been my mentors. Chuck Cosman, whom I used to run with, who I did my first trail walker with, was the first guy I really trained with a lot, and he knew a lot. He'd been into sport for quite a long time. He was a young guy, but he had his head around it. So he definitely was an influence on me, as well as those other guys I ran with early, like Adrian King and Rupert Chamberlain. And then, of course, Michael Mattis. I did most of my trail walkers with him. So I learned a lot from him. And the last year when I was in Canada, I've been running with a guy named Andrew Titus. Super influential on how I think about running, and has helped me to sort of think more in a healthier way about running, I think.
I know that Jackie, for instance, he views you as his mentor. right? He says you're the one that got him into running big time, right? Is there a way you actually pick your student or your mentee, if there's such a word?
No, Jackie. That's above kind of Jackie to say that. But no, Jackie was just somebody that I noticed running and I wanted to run with him. He's a super nice guy, and same. He's one of these people that really analyzes running and thinks about it. I'm not one of those people, so it's flattering that he sort of looked at me and watched my type of running and all of that. So I wouldn't say that I'm a mentor to Jackie, even though Jackie would disagree. He's just a great runner and a guy I like to run with.
You said Jackie studies form and he runs a particular way and he tries to improvise on that form a lot, right?
Yeah.
What about you? I mean, is what you've learned, has it come from just you sort of doing something yourself, or have you actually studied the way people run and have you tried to model yourself based on someone else's form?
That's a very good question. I've certainly changed how I run over the years. I mean, when I went to France to go to Kilian's Classic a few years ago, in that, now that we know, magical year 2012, it was when people were starting to talk about forefoot running and not heel striking, and all of that was super popular then. And I know that my running style was really bad. I mean, I was really slamming my heel down and not thinking at all about how I was running. And the Salomon Sense shoe was coming out then. I was trying those out for the first time, and I really did modify how I modified my gait. I improved my gait for sure. I'm not a beautiful runner. I haven't worked hard on my stride and on my foot strike and all of that, but I've certainly learned to run lighter and more on my midfoot than before.
Can you talk about Kilian's class? How did you hear about it, and what was your experience like?
Yeah, that was an amazing experience. One of my favorite experiences running as well. So how did it happen? Claire Price, had been in contact with Greg Volley, the Team Salomon, boss, basically. And he had been, I think, working on Claire a little bit to become part of Team Salomon, and Claire had thrown my name into the ring as well, and Greg immediately thought, okay, sure, why not? And invited the two of us to go to Kilian's Classic that year, and to run with everybody for the whole week. And yeah, that's how it all happened. Salomon reps from Hong Kong were also there. Wong Ho Fai was working for Salomon at the time, so he was there with us. So the week itself was incredible. I mean, they were talking about it as if it were an easy week for the athletes, a week to take off and chill and hang out together. Whereas for us, it really wasn't that. It felt like, wow, this is a big training week. We showed up in the Pyrenees at 2,000 meters, and it was every day, 2 runs a day, 2 longish, hard runs every day. It was all about testing equipment. And so we'd wake up in the morning, we'd eat, and then we'd go meet the Salomon designers and developers, and they'd give us some kit that was going to come out in the next year or two for us to test. And we'd put it on and go run for 2 or 3 hours, come back, fill out a bunch of papers, have lunch, and then pretty much the same thing in the afternoon. So we get to test. We were testing Suunto watches as well at the time, and the Sense light Sense top and the Sense shorts that most people wear now who are wearing Salomon stuff. So yeah, it was a hard week of training and testing.
How much of what you've become today as a runner would you attribute to that training camp that you did with Kilian? My question is, should a prospective, should a hardcore fast runner try and attempt to join that camp?
I don't know. I was already running quite a lot and running pretty well. But I certainly learned tons from that. Not not in terms of, okay, you need to do this, 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 and this, but it was just, you sort of begin to understand how just being in that environment with all of these amazing runners you just absorb, and you get a better idea of how those people have become so strong and become the icons that they are. I mean, Anna Frost, Emily, Killian, like, they were all there. And it was an easy week for them. So you certainly get a picture of what it takes. Yeah.
All right, so take us back to the humble beginnings. Yeah, so how did you get into this whole running thing? Let's start off with the sprints, and then talk to us about the ultras.
Okay. So it started way back in 2003. I finished my education degree at UBC in Vancouver, moved to Hong Kong, and that fall, I think October, November, I was living on Lama because it was a cheap place to live at the time, and I noticed a flyer for an adventure racing training camp for the weekend with a couple of legends. Actually, I didn't know that at the time. I had no idea who they were. It was Ian Adamson and John Howard, who are old school adventure racing, absolute legends. And it was a weekend thing, and it was like, oh, that looks cool. I like to kayak, and I'd love to be able to mountain bike better. I'd done a little bit of it as a younger kid. And so I signed up for this camp. It was run by Ryan Blair and co. And it was a weekend, all day, learning to kayak in little inflatable kayaks that were terrible, and mountain biking in cheap mountain bikes, and running around in the hills of Lama. And by the end of it, I was totally hooked. I loved it. I mean, I was in terrible shape. It was awful. It was ridiculous. We did a 2-hour mock adventure race at the end of the weekend, and I remember running along. It didn't take more than 5 minutes, and I was completely winded and begging my teammates to walk, but I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And it didn't take long from there. I was starting to do sprints, Michael Mattis's Action Asia sprints. I think the first one was the Repulse Bay one, and that would have been the same year, or the following year, so 2004 in the spring. And it was, 3 years of doing sprints and not much else. I did the Action Asia Challenge as well, but I was very, very much a weekend warrior. I wasn't running I don't think I'd ever run more than 15K at once until 2007 when I started running with Chuck Cosman. And so he got me into the Trail Walker team in 2007. Sort of a little bit of a last minute thing. It was September when I was officially on that team, and it was, okay, so we're going for training runs this weekend, Jeremy. This is the training run. It's 50K. It's like, what? 50K? I've never run more than a couple of hours. But it was, I think Rupert wasn't there for that first one. I think it was me, Chuck, and Adrian King, and it was on the Mac. Where did we finish? I'm not even sure where we finished. I remember visions of little bits of the Mac from that first run. But it slaughtered me, but I finished, and, from nothing to, not nothing, but near nothing to 50K. And, I finished exhausted and happy and, just ready for more. And I basically haven't stopped since.
Who was in that team again? So it was you, Rupert, Adrian, and Chuck. Chuck was the team leader.
Yeah.
That was the first time you did the Trail Walker in 2007.
Yeah.
And Chuck was the guy who came up with the training plan as well.
Chuck wasn't the leader. No, it was also Chuck's first Trail Walker, actually. I'm not sure if Adrian or Rupert was the team leader. They'd both done it many times already. We were the newbies who had no idea, and Adrian and Rupert were, just another Trail Walker.
Do you remember how long it took you to finish that first Trail Walker?
Yes, I do. It was 13:27-ish, 13 and a half hours. Yeah, and we were third that year. Oh, over the moon. Couldn't believe it.
And that was your first ever trail walker, and you did 13:27.
Yeah, first ever ultra. Yeah.
So talk to us more about that training, right? So Chuck would come up with this massive 50-kilometer, weekly run thing. What about during the week? What did you guys do?
That was great, actually. It was a really good training plan. I don't know if it would still work. I'd love to try. So basically it was Sunday. Didn't have any children then. Sunday, 50K or, 8 hours plus every Sunday. And we would it was September, October, and Trail Walker was in November. So it was basically 10 weeks of this training regime. And every Sunday was, basically as long as you can go, as hard as you can go. We didn't pace ourselves. It was just kill yourselves. And one of us would blow up and be like dragged along or, water splashed in the face or something. It was ridiculous. So that was Sunday. And then, we'd obviously not be in great shape for the next couple of days. So we never ran Monday or Tuesday. And Wednesday, we'd run the Wednesday night run, the Keith Noyes Wednesday night run, which was about an hour and a half fast blast. Again, really hard fast. Also, which took a bit of recovery, I think.
Where was this?
Sorry?
Which area was this in?
Here, where we are now. So Admiralty. Yeah, we'd run from the peak tram, the bottom of the peak tram, and then usually up to the peak, over to Stanley, or there are lots of different routes. This still goes on, Wednesday night runs, yeah. But yeah, on Hong Kong Island, yeah. And the only other run of the week was Friday night twins, which, again, it was the same sort of plan. How fast can we do the twins and back every Friday night? So Stanley Road and then back over. So over the twins one way and then back over the twins the other way. And yeah. It was sort of like a race between the four of us.
And the Sunday runs, start wherever and drop, and either you do what you can or you die in between, right?
Yeah.
Those sort of runs, were they all on the Mac?
Those were all on the Mac. Yeah. The Sunday runs were. So yeah, I guess we didn't get a lot of variety in our training, but I mean, we were running on the Trail Walker route, so I guess it served us well in that respect. Yeah.
And the Trail Walker as such, was it a very memorable, easy, was it an easy Trail Walker for you after all the training?
No, it wasn't an easy Trail Walker. We actually, Chuck and I were, dare I say this, we're more solid on the day, I think, than Adrian and Rupert were, by dumb luck, for sure. But, it was a hard Trail Walker. Like, we all suffered. There's no doubt about that. But I think Chuck and I fared a little bit better by the end. No Trail Walker is ever easy. But that one, there were a lot of ups and downs. Will the team still gelled well? We ran really well as a team, actually. Yeah, we didn't let anybody go. I think at a long time ago, but there was only one instance of somebody getting a little upset, and I think that was Chuck at the reservoir. We ran ahead a bit. He stopped to go to the bathroom, I think, and the three of us kept going and didn't wait for him, and it took him quite a while to catch up to us, but we sort of left him there because we thought he was feeling great and no problem, he'd catch us. I think he was a little bit put off by that, but other than that, we really did stay as a team and worked hard together. Yeah.
All right, to keep painting the picture, so what happened after 2007? Did you acquire your legendary status by then, or did it take more time?
Yeah, nice. No, definitely no legendary status then. It's funny, I didn't do Trail Walker the next year. Although we had an amazing Trail Walker and did work together as a team, for some reason I wasn't keen on doing Trail Walker the next year. But there's testament to the fact that it was tough. It was hard on me, for sure. I was not really ready for 100K. No, and I didn't step straight into ultras after that either. I might have run think I did run Green Power that year. I mean, there weren't the races that there are now, and I wasn't so into it that I was ready to jump on a plane and go races in Europe at that point. I kept running and running a lot more. Chuck and I were training together and doing Action Asia had a few team races at that point, but mostly trail, mostly 30K max. I did do King of the Hills that year, only the halves. It wasn't until the next year that I stepped up into the full marathons. And so I guess when Michael Mattis approached me from doing his sprints in 2009, he approached me about doing Trail Walker that November, and that's when I really started racing a lot more and doing longer stuff very frequently. Yeah.
Talk to us about that too. So what happened on the Trail Walker?
To be honest, the Trail Walker is with Michael. Aside from the one that we went super fast on, they kind of all blend in together. We've done a few of them together with lots of different teammates. I believe that year was the year we did it with Sue Yip and Darren Benson, which was a blast. It was a totally crazy Trail Walker. Sue Yip had his own support team. We had our support team. He didn't want our support team, and it was very interesting. That's all I'm willing to say about that one.
Right. So, I mean, the four guys, type A personalities, right? All of you guys are like, really running so fast, yeah? Do you guys talk much on the Trail Walker at all when four super competitive, fast people run?
I'm thinking about doing the Trail Walker with Peter Lee, whom we've also done it with, and there was lots of talking on that one. Generally, let me talk about racing with Michael, because that's who I've raced with most. Generally, Michael is very focused, as am I running. So there isn't a lot of banter, a lot of talking. It's more serious discussing, how we're feeling, making sure we're checking on each other, and what's coming up, and remember this is next, and prepare. It's very
matter of fact. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Thank you. It's very matter of fact, but it's not super tense, but it's not super chilled either. It's not chilled enough to be chatting away. Yeah.
If I were to ask you, what's the most unforgettable experience you've had? If you go back down memory lane and have to come up with one experience.
On trail?
On trail, yeah.
On trail? Okay. It's actually, I've got lots of interesting memories from trail walkers. But I think something that really sticks with me is from the Canadian Death Race. That was one of the hardest races I've ever done. Not because it's a really difficult race, but because I had a really difficult time there. The memory is going up one of the biggest climbs. It's fairly early on in the race, or not quite to the middle of the race anyway, about 50K in, and just feeling so unbelievably zonked, and laying down on the side of the trail and having a sleep at like 2 p.m. Just total mess. It's stuck with me. I don't know. Maybe it's a horror story more than a great memory, but it's really stuck with me. Yeah.
Oh, so we're going to talk about 3 of your races, right? I've picked 3 races. The Canadian Death Race, which you just alluded to, right? You came second, despite that little experience that you had, right?
Yes.
Let's start off with that, right? Talk to us about what is the Canadian Death Race, and where is it, and how long is it, and talk to us about your experience on it.
Okay, great. Canadian Death Race is it's a long established race in Canada. It's one of the earliest ultras in Canada. It's been around. I don't know exactly how long. At that point, I think it had been around 12 years or so. So it's been around 15 years maybe. And it happens in this town called Grand Cache, which is in the northern reaches of the Rockies, way up north in Alberta. It's a really bizarre place, actually. So when we went, we flew into Calgary, and we spent some time down near Jasper or down near Banff. Sorry, what's the name of the town?
I wouldn't know.
Sorry. Anyway,
meaning you and
Grant guys from New Zealand, who was also running for Solomon at the time, and Julia Bacher, who's still running for Solomon. So yeah, we hung out in sort of like the cool area of the Rockies for 7 or 8 days, getting stoked, really excited, lots of big, beautiful mountains around. And then the Solomon rep in Canada, who was taking care of us, Phil Villeneuve, packed us into his truck and was like, okay, it's time to go. Let's go up to the race. We drive for hours up through the Rockies. It's amazing and beautiful and these cool, quaint little towns. And then we arrive in Grande Cache, and it's this like town that people have forgotten completely. Like, it's a total dump. I mean, it's got lots of character, but man, it's seen better days for sure. And also, interestingly, as you come out of the Rockies is when you get to Grande Cache. So you're like, but they're right there, the mountains, and you're out of them, or you're sort of out of them. They've gotten a little bit smaller once you get to there. So, yeah, that's the setting. And the town, though, oh my God. Like, yeah, it's beat up and has seen better days, but the whole town is Canadian Death Race. Like, this is our event of the year. And everywhere, like, there are signs as you come into town, like big banners, welcome death racers, and like the whole thing is just a circus based around the death race. And everybody you see, like all the locals are like, hey, go death racer. You see them in town, and all the restaurants, the 4 or 5 of them that exist in the town, have like, death racer special, and everybody's talking about the death race, and everybody's looking at the people there for the death race. Like, the whole town relies on it. The whole town rallies around it, and it's amazing. It's an amazing experience, but utterly weird, especially coming out of,
So what was the course like?
The course was tough. It wasn't, beyond tough, but it is a challenge. I mean, there is a reason for calling it the death race, and it is a hard race, but it's not like racing the TDS or something. The TDS is definitely more climbing, more technical. It's weird. It's weird. I think people would, or I certainly would, think of it as a tougher, more amazing course if it didn't happen right beside the Rockies. If you couldn't see the huge mountains of the Rockies from the course while you're sort of a little bit away from that, I think that detracts from it a little bit. But it's consistent big climbs and descents. I mean, I think training in Hong Kong actually is pretty good for it, because we don't have anything too huge here. There's no really extended climb, and there's no really extended climb there either. It's much muddier there than here, and the trail's softer when you're running on the real trail, but it's a good mixed terrain race. Yeah.
And what was your experience on it?
I definitely had a really rough day. I started out, as usual, a little bit too fast, I think. But I was, for the first 30 or 40K, I was having so much fun on it that I wasn't really paying attention to how hard I was going. I mean, if you talk to Grant, who won the race that day, he noticed that I was already not feeling super strong early on. He pulled away from me quite early, and I remember on a couple of little climbs saying, oh, I think I'll just walk this hill. And Grant was sort of looking at me funny, like, why would you walk this? It's 20 meters. And so, yeah, there was something going on pretty early on. It was going to be tough. But as usual, I mean, I sort of marched on. I soldiered through all the climbs and just loved all the descents all day long. Let my legs go and flew down the downhills. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I had the big down where I very early in the day laid down for a nap. That was a major low, to say the least. It's such an interesting race because as you're running this solo, most of the participants aren't running it solo. It's broken up into 5 stages, so they do it in teams of 5 where one person does each stage. So even though maybe you're running in first or second or third or fourth, you're never really running alone. There are always other people around, the stage racers. So that was a big pick-me-up. I'd latch on to people throughout the day that were fresh and moving well and try to run with them for a while. And that really kept me going, kept me motivated. I didn't really have another majorly horrible moment until I think about 90K in. The last aid station might have been 100K in, I guess then. The last aid station, I'd started to not take in any food and was just drinking watered down Gatorade, and that's all I could take. And I remember coming into that aid station, seeing Phil, and Phil just kind of looking at me. Obviously, I'm all pale and pasty. And he pushed this chair out and said, "You can sit this time." And I sat for about 2 minutes and was like, no, I can't sit. And I got up and started to go again with my watered down Gatorade and nothing else. And went into a climb, into a forest and into a climb. It was dark by then. And I had a cramp and was just screaming pain, laid down on the ground in screaming pain with the cramp, and was trying to shout to Phil. It was like, "Phil!" But I was too far away. He didn't hear me. And at that point, one of the relay people came along and lifted me up, literally pulled me up off the ground. "Do you need a hand?" "Yes, I do. I'm cramping too bad." And and then that was that. And I kept going. Kept going from there and latched on to somebody else eventually that was running really fast, and just sort of hung on till the end. Yeah.
Despite all that, you still came second, right? Is that because you somehow had wind behind your back at some point, or what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really see any other individual racers for the entire day since Grant had left me. Like, whatever it was, 15 or 20K in. I was certainly looking over my shoulder by that point. I mean, I was feeling so horrible for most of the day, or for a lot of the day anyway. Amazing that I could hang on, and still I did sort of move pretty well for a lot of the day. I mean, my time wasn't stellar, but it was good enough for second. Yeah.
And when you felt that bad in the interim, as you described, how did you get yourself to continue to proceed and not quit?
I think I've certainly got some mental toughness in there somewhere. It doesn't always show up, but that day it did. I was motivated by being there. I was there for Solomon for that race, and that definitely was on my mind. And I was thinking, okay, you're here. It's not just you anymore. There's a team behind you, and you need to get this done.
Alright, so we're going to take a break here with Jeremy, and when we come back in part 2 of this podcast, we're going to talk about Jeremy's other races in the year 2012, and we're going to dig a bit deeper into his training routine and what he eats, how he thinks, and so forth. So stay tuned. Until next week, we'll hear part 2 of this episode with Jeremy Ritcey. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Hong Kong Trail Rockers podcast. If you liked it, please help us by going to our iTunes page to rate us and give us your feedback. Your feedback and rating will also help other people find this podcast. Our show notes are at hikeinhongkong.com. Thanks for listening. See you next week. And remember to go for a run and crank up the mileage.